Welcome to Season 2 of Proud Peeps. I'm your host, Justin Anovic. Today's guest, I've known for about 7 or 8 years, and she has one of the most interesting backgrounds of anybody that I've ever met. She was a flight controller at NASA. She is a business owner who also recently acquired another business, and she has some amazing stories. Welcome to the show today, Lori.
Thank you, Justin. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, if we can get right into it. My youngest, she is a huge fan of NASA and space. I actually did a cameo for somebody who I could afford 2 or 3 years ago, who was an astronaut, and he recorded this like really long cameo for my daughter. And so I'm excited to hear a little bit more about your background as a flight controller.
Absolutely. It was so much fun. I went to Purdue in computer electrical engineering, and through an internship there, I was lucky enough to be able to go work at NASA, and eventually it was a co-op program. So I worked every other semester. I went to Purdue and then at NASA at Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. And eventually I worked as a flight controller for the space shuttle program, first as an intern and then eventually in a full-time job. And I worked in the instrumentation and communications group. So we were called INCO. So if you ever watch like Apollo 13 or, they have like abbreviations for each role within the mission control center. And there's the room of like front room operators that you see at mission control. And then there's a back room of operators that support them. So I was in the back room, I wore a headset, and I was in charge. I was a data comm was my role. And I was in charge of the onboard data recorders on the space shuttle. So it was kind of like controlling a VCR tape, like a glorified VCR tape, but for the space shuttle. So it was super cool. I also
By the way,
trained
for our younger listeners and
Oh, yeah.
viewers,
They don't know what
VCR
that is.
was the predecessor to a DVD, which is predecessor to all the digital stuff now.
Right, yeah, they don't even know what that is. Yeah. Um, yeah, and then I also trained in a role called the instrumentation officer, who is in charge of watching all the telemetry coming back from the space shuttle, which is really interesting because the job is basically like to look for like if a bunch of telemetry, if a bunch of sensors all of a sudden report 0, it might mean that actually there's a different problem. So you're looking for systems level issues. It's just, I got to work with people that had been there since the Apollo program. I got to work with, got to connect with astronauts, just a lot of really amazing people to work with when I was, 20 years old coming out of college. Amazing, amazing job.
That's so amazing. I wonder if those things ever like ruin, folks for watching. Like there's a show For All Mankind, I think
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
on
yeah.
Apple, right? Like if you look at it, you're like, that's not real. Like that's so ridiculous.
No, I think a lot of times it's just fun. Like when I was working at NASA, Apollo 13 came out in as a movie when I was there, and so it was fun because I was watching the movie with a bunch of other folks that worked at NASA. In the theaters there were a bunch of other folks there, and a lot of times it's just fun to see space celebrated and
Right.
all the work that's happening there. Yeah.
Do you think one of the things that you described from that time of what you learned, do you refer to as like troubleshooting? Like you became exceptionally good at identifying a problem,
Absolutely.
troubleshooting it, and then quickly resolving it?
Yeah, you're on the spot. That's what you train for in simulations, which I think is so interesting, is that idea of like you have to be very quick to identify what might be wrong. And, in the process of simulations, they're intentionally breaking things and trying to see, do you catch it? That's what you're training for. And I think that's really interesting. Like there have been all sorts of ways I've been able to apply that in terms of what I've done next in life, and a really great skill to learn early on.
Yeah, I mean, it's troubleshooting. I mean, it's a different thing of, being my mother-in-law's troubleshooter for her Wi-Fi for instead of her calling up versus like,
Right.
space shuttle. But like there is a logical thing. I think of things in like decision trees, like if then but statements. And I kind of see that in my head. And
Yeah.
I would assume like your times power of 50 in that case and some right, like just from natural training, because
Right.
like, experience then determines like, okay, it goes down this branch and I can already jump to the third or fourth. I
Right.
wonder how much you relate or think back to what you're doing now as owning, leading, operating essentially two different businesses, Brilliance, and then you just bought a manufacturing company, and
Yep.
definitely want
North
to talk
Melissa.
about
Yep.
that. But do you sit and think, oh, I am troubleshooting, or this is somewhat related to my earlier years? Do you ever connect those dots on a
Oh,
weekly, daily
absolutely.
basis?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, when you think about so at Brilliance, we're building e-commerce sites for customers. There's all sorts of elements of, at NASA, you practice for your launch, right? With e-commerce, you practice for your go live. It's not quite as mission critical, but it's certainly mission critical to ensure things don't go wrong and to troubleshoot and identify what might be wrong quickly. The idea of at NASA, there was all sorts of redundancy in systems
Mm.
so that if one thing failed, you had a backup or you were able to identify how to roll something back and ensure people are safe. We do that in e-commerce and in digital all the time.
Yeah,
So
certainly. I mean,
yeah,
the site needs to be up in order to transact, and like you
right,
have to quickly figure out the problem if there is anything. And especially for you as the implementer, and you run the different sites for customers, I would think like there's so many different fail points. Like it could be Optimizely, it could be
right.
Azure, it could be any number one of the any and the customer has you on the hook to help figure out where it is, even though it might not have anything to do with the code you implemented or anything like that. I always found that interesting and fascinating. Is where do you align towards trying to troubleshoot those things?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other piece that you learn really quickly as a flight controller is like how you communicate is really important. Like you need to ensure, the way we would talk to each other on headsets. You can't be really verbose in what you're saying. You need to communicate quickly, get to the point, and also make sure you're communicating factually about what's happening. You don't want to mislead people. And so those are all just good general skills. I think in any job, but certainly in roles where you need to be able to deliver a high level of support for people.
I think that is interesting because I still have this memory. Adam Berger, who was the chairman and he was the CEO briefly of Episerver, I learned from him how to talk in short spurts because he would double click onto everything.
Mm,
And for me, if somebody's paying attention and they're interested, they will ask you about it. So you don't have to do that 8-minute long diatribe. And I would have
right.
people join, and I would say, don't speak for 7 minutes. Do 45-second increments. And you're right. Like, I can imagine, right? Like, you say this thing, if they're like, got it, or if they need more, let them tell you that they need more versus you explaining everything in one long sentence.
Yep,
So, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about the journey that you went on with Brilliance and then acquiring the manufacturing
Yeah,
company. I mean, like it's an interesting combination for sure.
it's been so much fun. So from at NASA, I met my husband, Dave. So we were both flight controllers for the space shuttle program. And he was also a part of that same internship program at Purdue. He graduated a year before I did. And he went to work for Rockwell Automation. When he graduated, there was a hiring freeze at NASA. And then I got a full-time job at NASA. He worked from Rockwell's field office in Houston, Texas. So we were both in Houston. And eventually he had a promotion to Rockwell's headquarters in Milwaukee.
Hmm.
And so that's when we ended up relocating to Milwaukee, which is where we live today, closer to both of our family. I grew up in Michigan, he grew up in Chicago. And I was trying to figure out what could be as cool as space. And so I had this background in computer engineering. I had I an entrepreneurial spirit. I was just interested in like problem solving, and I knew it was 1998, and like the web was in its infancy. Amazon was still known for selling books, and I knew businesses that needed to get on to have a website basically. And so that's how Brilliance got started. Is I saw a need. Most small businesses, you see a need in the market, you decide you can solve it. And so I went and started meeting with people. They would say, I don't need a website, I have a Yellow Pages ad, which is just so funny that was the way things were, but it was. And meanwhile, Dave managed the largest data warehouse at Rockwell Automation. And so he was really good at the complexity of B2B data. And so after a few years, we manufacturer in New York read an article I wrote and had published online around accepting credit cards online, and became one of our first large manufacturing clients that we were building an e-commerce site for, a B2B e-commerce site for. And that was completely custom built because at the time there wasn't software to do those things. And yeah, so that's really how, the kind of the origin story of Brilliance. We grew. Dave eventually left his job at Rockwell, and now he leads our development team. And yeah, now we've won the Inc. 5000 twice.
Nice.
Yeah, it's super fun. And it's, yeah, and our business is just, so it's been 26 years.
Wow.
And yeah, and I just love it. Our niche is working with mid-market manufacturers and distributors and helping them implement digital to support their growth. And so as a part of that growth journey, one of the things that we identified, like to really do that well, we saw an opportunity to acquire a small manufacturing company who's making the majority of their money online, so that we could kind of effectively drink our own Kool-Aid, like show that we know what we're doing when it comes to from digital to help them grow and make money. And also, I'll also learn some things, make money in a new way. We just thought this sounded like a really fun endeavor to go do something new. So we acquired Norz and Lefse in Rushford, Minnesota, in February of this year. Oh, sorry, in February. We're in a new year. In February of 2024. And that's just been a ton of fun. So I don't know. Do you know what Lefse is, Justin?
No, no.
Okay. All right. So Lefse is a Norwegian flatbread. It's made from potatoes. And so it's like a tortilla, but it's made from potatoes. It's thinner than a tortilla. And I had never tried it before. I'm not Norwegian. I had never tried it before we started to get to know Norz and Lefse. They were, the owner was retiring, and just a really great business that's been around, for 40 years in a small town of 2,000 people in Minnesota. And they are really committed to making great lefse, and they have a ton of customers who love it, and they sell it on their own website and also on Amazon. And so we saw this as a real opportunity for us to help them grow.
Wow, that is impressive. And I think I just keep hearing you say, like, eat your own dog food, drink your own
Right.
Kool-Aid, whatever
Right.
the analogy or metaphor is. I mean, that's impressive. I mean, I don't know of, I haven't heard of anybody, any other digital agency, SI, do something like that. But you're right. I mentioned I just started as, a CMO for a company called Loftware, and we actually use Optimizely. And now I'm getting in and I'm going, okay, that's just a little different than like how we presented it. Now you're using it and you're rolling
Right.
up your sleeves and say, okay, like, not that I now see what customers are seeing, but it's totally different being on the other side versus just
Absolutely.
pontificating about what's possible. But now you realize, okay, here are the actual obstacles that are in the way of us achieving anything.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I used to think so. We moved. So Northern Lefts is a little too small for Optimizely at this point in terms of our size, but we moved Northern Lefts from Wix to BigCommerce within
Mm,
3 months of our acquisition. And what's interesting about it, I mean, that was great and exciting. But what I realized, because now I was on the customer side, and my team at Brilliance were, I was the customer to my team. So all sorts of interesting things
I
in that
bet.
process. Yes. But what I realized was, when you're the agency, you really kind of feel like the thing that you're doing is must be the most important thing for this customer, right? And meanwhile, we have all sorts of other things that are going on at Norza and Lefsa that between staffing and production and all sorts of other headaches that make it a
Right.
challenge to give our agency Brilliance what they really need from us. And it just gave me a new perspective on the reality of what it's like to be a customer. So
Yeah, you're right. And so, like, even though you put a timeline together as brilliance for a customer and the customer doesn't, meet that, you're like,
right,
hey, we're kind of off schedule, not really realizing all the different other things, a part of their day job that they probably have to go through in
right,
order to even get to your meeting to do that, one piece. Yeah, that is super fascinating.
yeah.
I'm curious. I mean, with the background, with the essentially owning two businesses, what are you most proud of in your career? What are you most
Yeah.
proud of what you've done and accomplished?
I know it's a challenging question. There are so many things that I am proud of. I think if I had to really focus on one, it isn't so much an event as I think it's more about like my internal growth in this process. Like the person I was when I started Brilliance is so much different than the person I am today. And the things that the ways that I have grown in that process. I'm a big believer in I love the idea of helping other people realize like whatever potential they have and like in being a part of that. One of the things that I've realized in my own growth story is that to do a good job of supporting others, I needed to be doing work on me. And so I'm really proud. I really enjoy the person I am today, which is a fun thing to be able to say, right?
I mean,
That
I love
yeah,
that. I mean, truly, like yeah. I mean, there's experience, there's other things, putting people, and understanding what they're going through and helping them. But I didn't exactly tell you why I wanted you on the show. You are one of the most human people that I knew. You were always down to earth, you were always relatable, you always would it's not small talk to ask about somebody, it's not small talk to be like, how are you doing? Like, I always felt like there was this actual desire to care about. And I've heard from folks that work for you and work at part of Brilliance, and they always described it as a family, in a good way, oriented, where people care about each other. And
yeah.
while it's a business at one part, and that does have to come from you, definitely from a top down approach, people learn behaviors based off of the hierarchy. And so I'm excited that you said that, because that's actually my belief in you. And without, portraying it on you, I'm so happy that you actually said that.
Well, thanks. Yeah.
And uh, your husband Dave, how are you? What I imagine of you being a customer of Brilliance is that you're talking as the customer, and then you're like, "Let me put the hat on for Brilliance now," and you kind of go back and forth. But like, how has that dynamic been? Not just with Dave, but like with the whole business.
With our
I'm sure that
team.
you communicating effectively and all of that within the organization, you explained what was going on. But like, how has that dynamic been?
Oh, it's been fun. I mean, we all laugh. We get on calls. I mean, we all laugh, and they'll say, "Well, the customer is being really difficult." Like when there's a report at Brilliance about, we have customer health scores on all of our customers, and then we get to Norza and Lefsa, and like, well, this customer is behind in their getting us something. So there's all sorts of jokes about it, but it is really interesting because it has. I mean, we do all of the same processes that we would do with our customer, and it's given me a new ability to look at some of the things that we'll ask a customer for or that we'll communicate to a customer and realize, oh, well, we thought we were being really clear, but actually, like I got a little lost in what, in this process, even though I have all the background to know it from my team side. And also like when I communicate it to other people at Norza and Lefsa, helping them to understand what my team's trying to communicate, I realized, oh, yeah, this isn't as clear as we might think it would be. So it's been really good.
I mean, what you're most proud of is kind of being introspective in many ways of like, yourself. That's why I think those two things about how you're positioning yourself, I would love to be a fly on the wall to just, see how that goes, because your growth for the business for Brilliance has probably been, accelerated in some ways of what you've learned because now you're experiencing that other side, but your
Yeah.
introspective ability for yourself and how you operate has probably been, picked up too, just through this experience.
Absolutely. Well, in order for us to go acquire Norns and Lefse, so I'm the president at Norns and Lefse, I'm the CEO, president at Brilliance, but it has meant that I had to step out of some things I was doing at Brilliance in order to focus more on Norns and Lefse. And I mean, when you're in a process of growth, well, or I should say over the last 26 years for Brilliance, it's always been a process of stepping out of things because I was originally doing all of the things, and as you grow and bring on more people, you need to do less in order to grow. But that's been fun because I used to be Brilliance's sales engineer and now I'm not. There are other people in our organization that do that. And so it relates to introspection in the sense of like both being able to let go of things that you kind of had control over that takes some learning on my part to be able to let go of things being done in a certain way. And also it provides some real opportunities to let other people grow, which is really fun. And I both learn more about myself in the process and also get to see other people learning and growing and doing new things. So I
I
love
have a
it.
feeling like every year, every 5 years, every 10, you're like, okay, I grew even more. Like at what point? And it's great.
Yeah.
Like it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
One of the other things, and prepping and chatting with a little bit about this, I usually ask like, "What's your favorite TV show, movie, musical?" And also like, what interesting trip have you taken? But actually, you have one that answers both in many ways, right? You went to New York and saw a couple musicals.
Yeah.
You want to tell me about that experience?
Sure. Yeah. So it was my 50th birthday last year, and we decided, and my birthday is January
I just
2nd.
turned 50 last year as well. My wife just turned it on Tuesday as
Oh,
well.
yeah?
So we're all in the same club.
Awesome, cool, great. Well, and my birthday's on January 2nd, and usually my birthday kind of feels like a bit of a bummer because, well, it sounds like you've got a January birthday in your family too, but it's just like you're right off of Christmas, and I don't feel like any more presents or, it's just kind of, and so like going into my 50th birthday, I really wanted something that I could just enjoy. And so I like planned the thing that I thought would just be the most fun for me, and it was well, I had such a great time. So we flew to New York City on January 1st, so we weren't there for all the
That's good.
New Year's Eve stuff, right? And then and yeah, we saw Wicked and we saw Hades Town, and those were both amazing musicals. I had so much fun, and my two boys who now are 16 and 22, but would have been a little younger then. But yeah, came with, and some other family came with, and it was just such a fun time to all be there together. We went on some walking tours of like Midtown Manhattan, the High Line. There was a tour of Queens from a group called Streetwise New York, I think is the tour group. That was like a walking tour where they kind of give you the history of Queens. And I love stuff like that, where you kind of get to know like a little bit off the beaten path and get to
Yes.
know more of the history. So yeah, and I love musicals. I love musicals and theater. I was in theater in high school and college, which I don't know if that's a surprise or not, but I enjoy that kind of stuff too. So yeah, a ton of fun.
Nice. I know everybody's like, oh, we have a local, the tour goes through for Wicked and, in Charlotte, it's like,
Sure.
oh, it was amazing. Like, it's probably just like Broadway. And then you go to Broadway and it's the sets, it's the
Yeah.
stage direction, and it's the theaters themselves that are so historic and interesting. I mean, the seats are very uncomfortable for a guy 6'3", but other than, I mean, it's a different experience, and seeing Wicked in Charlotte or Milwaukee is a lot different than seeing it in New York.
Oh,
So
absolutely. It was an amazing experience. I will never forget it. So it was fun.
I grew up in that area, and we'd go to musicals all the time. But the one that was the most interesting, which I think would be a great practical joke for someone, is a off Broadway show called Tina and Tony's Wedding. Have you ever heard of it?
I haven't. No.
So it's literally you show up and you're assigned to the groom's or the bride's side,
Oh,
and they get out of the limo and they're all drunk and they all get in fights. You bring presents and you go and you actually go to the chapel and they get married, and then you walk a couple blocks to the reception and you have food, and there's like it's a play, and it probably
mm,
changes each day based on the interactions with folks. But it would like I can only imagine being like, hey, we're gonna go to my friend's wedding, like let's just stop in or whatever, and it's a
sure.
play.
Oh, that's awesome. That is so cool.
Yeah, I
What
mean,
an
I
example.
saw it when we just both said we're a little over 50, but I saw it when I was probably like 15, 16. I think it's still on off Broadway, so it's still going, and
Well, I'll have to
it's
plan
super
it for my
interesting.
next trip.
I mean, it's so funny. There's so many things up there that it's like, what do you do and go see? And,
Mm,
and I mean, seeing Phantom originally or Starlight Express or like those
yeah.
when, I was growing up were super interesting. And my wife is she went to school, commercial music. So she's a singer. And so, she certainly likes to see those as well. So, and then I
That's
think you took
awesome.
another trip to Puerto Rico. My
I
older
did.
brother got married in Puerto Rico like 10, 12 years ago. And I've been a couple of times, but it's a very nice island. And I'm not sure if it was for, just, going to beaches and stuff, but there's like historic parts of like old San Juan and the
Yeah.
forts and just, all that. It's super interesting. Did you have a
Yeah.
good time there too?
Oh, we had a great time. We spent 2 weeks and we went to so the fun part was we didn't spend a lot of time in San Juan. We stayed in VRBOs on the east side of the island in
Hmm.
Fajardo. And we did some hiking there and went to there's the El Yunque National Forest. We did some kayaking. We went to the west side of the island in Rincon where they have a lot of surfing. We didn't surf, but we stayed in this house that was like way up on kind of the side of I don't know if it's a mountain, but it felt like a mountain. It was very steep driving and like it was like a one lane road. And so I was always just certain we were gonna die on our way up to our the place we were sleeping every evening, but it was beautiful. It was so beautiful. And then we went and stayed in another place that was on the south side of the island, Boca Raton. So it was so neat to just get to experience, get a little off the normal tourist attractions. I shouldn't have been surprised by this, but I didn't expect so few people to speak English, which I guess
Hmm.
which I should have realized, silly me. But it's always the things like when you get outside and experience some culture that's different, so much fun. So,
I agree. Yeah, and the island is surprisingly big,
yeah.
and definitely different parts. Yeah, my brother he got married at a hotel. I can't remember which one, but it was a very interesting wedding. They each changed clothes like 4 or 5 times.
Oh, wow.
He arrived after the ceremony. He arrived on horseback. She was carried
Wow.
like Cleopatra by her brothers, and it was like, it was a little different than how we would experience it. But the best memory I had is that my youngest, who's now 13, she took her first steps there. So, and luckily, and it had it on video, and
Wow.
so that's kind of that. So yeah, and I had my son who was 6 or 7 at the time ish. I had him do a toast and I gave him some, Spanish words, but it was like, me llamo Cooper. ¿Dónde está la biblioteca?
That's great.
So there's some good memories there, but we were there. It was a little chilly, so we didn't really get
Mm,
to, go in the water or anything. But it was it's a very nice place for sure.
it's beautiful.
So yes. Well, thank you for sharing your experiences. Thank you for sharing, your background.
Absolutely.
And I'm so happy that we got to catch up and you be on this show. So thank you for
Thank
joining,
you
Lori.
so much. It's been a blast. Thanks, Justin.